They say no one could survive more than a few minutes in the freezing water the night the Titanic sank. But that night, one man fell into the ocean and didn't freeze. This is the Titanic story almost nobody knows. We all think we know the Titanic story. An unsinkable ship, a calm night, one iceberg, and over 1,500 lives lost. And we're told one thing again and again. Anyone who entered the water was doomed. The water that night was barely above 0 degrees Celsius. Cold shock hits in seconds. Muscles lock. Breathing fails. Survival beyond a few minutes was considered impossible, which is why what happened next makes no sense. His name was Charles Joughin. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. He was the Titanic's chief baker. When the iceberg struck, Joughin didn't panic. He didn't run. Instead, he did something unexpected. For hours, he helped others escape, while knowing he probably wouldn't. Then, facing the inevitable, he made a decision no survival manual would recommend. He drank alcohol, not to celebrate, not to forget, but to prepare. When the ship finally broke apart, Joughin stayed until the last possible second. And then, he entered the water. He didn't scream. He didn't thrash. His body didn't shut down. The alcohol didn't make him immune to the cold, but it delayed the shock just long enough. He spent more than 2 hours in the freezing Atlantic. 2 hours where survival wasn't supposed to be possible. When he was rescued, he was still alive. Joughin testified after the disaster. His story was recorded, but it never became famous. Because it didn't fit the narrative. Because it sounded unbelievable. The Titanic was a tragedy. But within it, there were moments that defied everything we think we know. And if this story surprised you, remember, the ocean keeps more secrets than we imagine. The night was over, but for the survivors, the nightmare had just begun. Doctors would later say his body should have failed, his muscles should have locked, his heart should have stopped. People began asking questions. How was he alive when so many stronger men were not? By every medical standard of the time, his survival made no sense, and that made people uncomfortable. He didn't want attention. He didn't want fame. He barely spoke about it. When investigators heard his story, they wrote it down and quietly moved on. Because history prefers simple answers, heroes, villains, rules, not exceptions. And no, this does not mean alcohol saves you from freezing. In most cases, it makes things worse. What saved him wasn't the alcohol, it was his calm, his slow movements, and pure chance. For every miracle, there were hundreds of silent tragedies. Survival doesn't always feel like a victory. Sometimes it feels like a question with no answer. The Titanic wasn't just a ship. It was human arrogance made of steel. Disasters don't follow rules, and survival doesn't always belong to the strongest. In the end, he wasn't a hero, just a man doing his job, until the very end. Some stories are too strange to be believed, so they disappear, because history still has secrets, and they're waiting for someone to listen. The ocean doesn't care who you are, or what you believe. It takes lives, and sometimes it spares one. Truth is often stranger than legend.